So, hi everybody, and please bear with me and apologise if you don't get the full answers that you would like. What I would say, I'll just introduce myself. So, I have work at the Leeds Jewish Welfare Board for probably nearly 40 years. My background is mental health social work, and I've previously managed the teams here, the community support teams, but I'm now semi-retired. So I only do the initial assessments for new service users coming in. I am Jewish, and I also belong to what's called the Harrogate, which I will talk to you about, which is the Jewish Burial Society. So I personally am involved at times when I can do it in preparation of the bodies for burial, for Jewish Orthodox burial. So that's a little bit of my background.
Wonderful. Thank you, Janine. Okay, so we're going to start off with, would you share with us, Janine, how Jewish beliefs about life, death, the afterlife, how those beliefs shape attitudes towards end of life and funeral care?
So the first thing about Judaism is that it emphasizes the preservation of life through what they call the principle of pikuach nefesh, which means a saving of life overrides almost everything in all religious duties. So that is the main principle prior to Jewish belief. And the idea stems from the belief stems from the idea that life is sacred and belongs to God, and humans are obligated to protect it. So that's where the beliefs comes from. And this obligation extends to breaking other commandments, like those, for example, the Sabbath. You can break the Sabbath. You could break dietary laws, Orthodox dietary laws. So it is a duty for all Jews to save and act another life, another person's life, if they can. That is irrespective of anybody else's faith or background. So that isn't just to save a Jewish life, it's to preserve anybody, any life from any background, any faith or none. So the core principles of that is that the sanctity of life, all life is considered sacred and is created in the image of God and therefore must be protected. Other principles potentially could be that God's ownership of life, meaning that only God can take a life, making it a sin for humans to do so. And then we've discussed about the saving of life and overriding all of the laws. So that is the sort of main principle behind that.
Okay, and what about the afterlife, Janine? What's the Jewish perspective on what happens after death?
So there isn't as such an afterlife that the body goes into heaven. What the belief is, this is my understanding, and there are different, but the main understanding that it's not the body that goes, it's the soul that goes. So, and the more that you do in life, the more good deeds that you do in life, the more that your soul is elevated into a heaven, basically. And part of the burial ritual is that everything is done very basically, so that when we say the Messiah comes back, which is what the belief is, you can basically, in very simple terms, get a quick getaway. So you can then, so there are no, which I'll discuss with you in terms of the burial, how Jewish people are buried, and yeah, so that's basically the principle of that.
Okay, and what can you, I guess, leading on from that, can you tell us a little bit about the key rituals or customs or rites of passage that happen before somebody dies, if the opportunity presents itself, and then at time of death, and then afterwards in terms of the funeral ritual, and maybe a little bit of what they're based on, what the principles are that guide them?
So when somebody's actually died or in preparation for death, do you mean? Or
Either, Janine, either. Both, if you're happy to share, or but
so
either.
when somebody's actually dying, you shouldn't speed death along. So everything should be done naturally. Everything should be done as dignified as possible. Ideally, you shouldn't leave the dying person alone. Somebody should be with the person, either a family member, a friend, or a professional. Very orthodox people say prayers along with the person, provide as much comfort as possible, providing as much dignity as possible, and to avoid hastening death. So the Jewish law does prohibit any action that could hasten death. So some families may request life-sustaining measures. Sometimes, keeping a ventilator, it has to be, keep it and ventilating patients. Having said all that, also respecting medical interventions and medical advice. So we wouldn't go against medical advice, but everything would be done as dignified and in appropriate time as possible. So that is one of the things that they would say. After a person has passed away, so if somebody's in a nursing home or in a hospital or in a hospice, ideally to remove any forms of intervention that's been attached to the body, close eyes, not really to move the body, and contact what they call the Jewish Harrogate, which is the burial society, which is basically the Holy Society. That's what it's called. Harrogate is the Holy Society, which is a group made up of mostly of a group of volunteers, and they will prepare and wash the body, which I will tell you about if you want me to go to the next stage. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, thank you, Janine. Please, if you're happy to, please do, because I suppose we've kind of naturally. So what happens then? What do these group of volunteers? What process and rituals?
Every city, every town will have its own Harrogate, which more or less has its own basic. Most of the customs and practice are more or less similar. Some will have different sort of slightly different ideas about things, but it's basically the same. Leeds has a Jewish mortuary, which is funded and paid for by the Jewish community, and is partly paid for, mostly paid for by synagogue membership. So part of your membership of a synagogue is a contribution to what's called the Harrogate. And when a Jewish person dies, the Harrogate basically springs into action. So you don't have to, a Jewish person does not have to contact funeral directors, choose coffins, choose clothes, garments. There's a format that takes place. So once all the official paperwork is carried out, because one of the things I must say to you, just going backwards as I'm speaking, is that Jewish law does not override the law of the land. So English law, British law takes precedent, and that will be the same for any country wherever you are in the world. So the law of the land always takes precedent. So if you need to have an autopsy, for example, it must take place, because Jewish burials normally take place, if not on that day, then the next day. If the law dictates that it has to take place, that an autopsy has to take place, then that has to take place, and the coroner and whoever has to take that. If there's that kind of a legal issue, then that has to take precedent. An invasive autopsy is, if potentially can be prevented, that would be ideal, because the idea of Jewish burial is that you are born with nothing and you're born whole, and your body should be buried in the same state again. And so what's happened is now technology that you can have non-invasive what's the word?
autopsies, the digital postmortems, yeah.
And actually, the Leeds Jewish community has worked in contact in close proximity and collaboration with the Muslim community in Bradford to fund that, because also the Muslim community, I think my understanding, also have a similar belief system as well. So that's a really positive way of collaborative working as well, joint working. So once all that's been sorted and all the legal paperwork's in place, the body is then removed by usually a Jewish undertaker to the Jewish mortuary. And usually a Jewish burial takes place, usually, as I say, normally either on that day or the day after, usually within 24 hours. And it's actually what they call a mitzvah, a good deed, to do that as soon as possible. Some of the reasons why a quick burial is suggested is that the Bible describes the burial of King Saul, who was buried the same day he died. And then its respect for the deceased allows the family to begin the quick grieving process. And there are other practical considerations in hot countries historically, is that bodies were buried very quickly for obvious reasons. And spiritually, the significance is that the soul is released from the body at burial, with a swift burial helps the soul of that person to move on. So those are some of the reasons why they suggest that the burial is so quick. So going back to what you were asking about how the burial, what happens at the preparation of the body, it's done by volunteers. So there's one person who coordinates it, who's a paid person, but they usually have, and it's done by, for a woman, it's usually 3 women, and for man, it's usually 3 men. It's done in the most respectful ways, prayers are said, and it really only discuss anything. There's no conversation about football or what you're watching on television. It's purely based for that person that you are preparing. You talk to the person, you ask for forgiveness if you haven't done everything in true accordance, if you've missed anything in true Jewish Orthodox tradition, but you always, it's the focus of that preparation for burial is with the most respect. We then strip the body of any clothing that person's wearing, and we wash the body. So you wash the body in warm water, and then you pour 3 actual buckets of cold water over that person, and then we dry them and we dress them in shrouds. So every single Jewish person, irrespective of their background, their place in society, their level of orthodoxy, whether they're Orthodox practicing or not, but they are born an Orthodox Jewish person, has exactly the same burial. There is no division in death. There is complete parity in death. The reason is we're born into the world the same, and we leave the world in the same way. So every single person, irrespective of their financial, cultural, religious, complete parity in death. So you're buried in shrouds, none of your own clothes, and also you can't take anything with you. So you can't put jewelry in, you can't put photographs in, you can't. It's a completely, as you were dressed in the shrouds. We then placed in a coffin, which is a completely basic coffin. It's exactly the same coffin that everybody is buried in. There's no nails. There's no when the lid goes on, it is locked with a dowel. It's a wooden dowel that you bang in, because everything has to be biodegradable. And again, for the reason is that when the Messiah comes, you can break away easily. That's the rationale behind it. But there's no fancy coffin, there's no metal, there's no fancy handles, no flowers. Jewish burials are very sparse, and it's quite shocking if you've never witnessed one, but it's very sparse. So there's no flowers, there's no it's just everybody's exactly the same. And it's usually, the body is prepared about an hour or so before the funeral, and as soon as the coffin's on, the funeral director takes the body away, the coffin, and it's then taken off for burial. Jewish people do not believe in cremation. It's always burial, always burial. Orthodox Jewish people, it's always burial.
And where does that come from, Janine? That
because if you come as a whole person and not in ashes, so that's why.
Okay. And what? Sorry, Jean.
I was going to say, and also you are buried. Jewish cemeteries are never in the synagogue grounds or within the city. They usually find Jewish cemeteries are outside. So the Jewish cemeteries in Leeds are usually, you'll see them on the motorway. If you come down the M62, the M1, or there's Jewish, usually what they would say outside the city walls, because there's always a separation between life and death. So that's the reason why usually Jewish cemeteries are out of the city.
Okay, thank you. And you've answered some of this already, or you've mentioned some of this, but what's the role of family members and the wider Jewish community in supporting somebody either when they're dying or after they've died? And also be interesting to hear more longer term, so in the days after the funeral, and as somebody, I suppose, of family members enter a period of bereavement, what that
the actual funeral itself, quite often family members, including women, will take part in the actual burial. So they'll actually use the spade and use the back of the spade to shovel the mud over the coffin, and they use the back of the spade because that's meant to symbolize like a resistance, a reluctance to let that person go. So it's different than your normal. So can participate in the actual burial, so 2 or 3 scrapings of the soil into the ground. After the funeral, usually what happens is that there's a line and people separate and let the people who are mourning walk through to give them respect. Then we usually go back to the family member's home. Quite often it's the person who's died's home, or it's a close family member. The people, and you go when you say what is called a sitting shiva. Shiva in Hebrew means 7. And you sit shiva for 7 days. And what happens is you go soon after the funeral, the person goes back to the house with immediate members, and the people who are sit shiva are a spouse, a parent, a child, or a sibling. So the immediate family, they are the people. So if you've lost a parent, it would be a spouse, the siblings, if there are, if again a parent may still be living, or your children, or so not grandchildren who they don't sit, but it's the immediate bloodline. The one thing I will tell you in Leeds, and I'm sure this is the same, sorry, I keep thinking about things, that no Orthodox Jewish person will not have an Orthodox burial. So what happens is that, as I said earlier, part of your membership is contributed towards the burial. If a person doesn't have money in their estate, or they can't afford it, because every Jewish, but no burial of any denomination is a cheap fair. The Orthodox synagogues in Leeds have a rota, so they will carry the cost, they will bear the cost if that individual doesn't have the means, the financial means to cover the cost. So it's the not to have a Jewish burial is just not is out the question for most people. They always want concerns of death or dying. People, whether they've been religious or not, from my experience working at the Jewish Welfare Board, people who have been quite alienated through choice or chosen not to be part of the community or not practiced at all, quite often come back and want to know how to have a Jewish burial. So going back, so that's just as I go moving forward, we go to the back at the house, and you're given family, a friend or another family member prepares what's called a meal, and this usually consists of a bagel, which is round, a hard-boiled egg or egg of some kind, and herring. And it's all to do with the because it's round and it's an egg, it's to do with the continuation of life. So it's like, they call it a little breakfast, you usually have to eat it. The herring, sometimes people give because it's salty and for tears. So that's the Jewish, most food and everything in Judaism has anything to connection with food, and there's always a symbol to do with it, and that sadly is to do with a funeral. So and all the burial and everything that's done is all organised by the what we call the Jewish Burial Society, the Harrogate. Then the family take over, all friends. You're not, for 7 days you sit on low chairs, so you sit on what they call shiva chairs, which are very low chairs, because you're meant to, again, show a separation between life and the mourners and the death, and people come and pay their respects, and you say prayers in the morning and in the evening, and people come to your house. You don't, the door is open, you don't knock on the door, you just walk in. People, family members bring food. You're not meant to do anything. You're not meant to do anything at all. And I've just forgotten one thing to tell you. Just before the funeral, you have what's called cutting kriya, which means that you wear a garment, you choose a garment, a cardigan, and somebody from the Burial Society will get a knife and you pull it open, and you wear this garment, a cardigan, and you pull it open by your heart, and that's again meant to be a sign of grief, and you wear that cardigan, so there's a tear maybe of so big, something like that, and that is something that you wear, and it's called cutting kriya, and again it's to let the grief out. So back at the house, you're meant to, everyday domestic needs are not meant to be your concern. You're not meant to worry about them. So everything is done for you. So friends, family bring food in, bring meals in. You are not meant to have shown your vanity. So mirrors are covered with tablecloths, televisions, because you're not meant to watch the television or listen to radio. You meant people, sometimes it can appear to be like a party, but people, when I say it's a good death, it's been, the time is right if there's such a thing, but people reminisce, show photographs. It can, and it's a way of sort of reflecting and helping people through the grieving process. And so that's usually for 7 days at night time. Apart from the Sabbath, you don't do that on the Sabbath. It stops on the Sabbath, but starts again on Sunday if it's on Sunday, and that's 7 days.
Okay, thank you, Janine. And how have practices, if at all, been adapted to modern life? So you've mentioned the importance, for example, of a Jewish burial. Is there any way that things have evolved, practices have evolved, just because life has changed so much?
I think the process that I've said is an Orthodox Jewish burial. So, like all religions and faith, there are people who are not connected as much to the Jewish faith, or may have married a partner from a different religion. So, and want to be buried with their partner, that may want to. So there are different forms. So there's liberal, there's the sort of like how does that, sort of less religious Jewish practices. So there are people who are now cremated, but that's not within the Orthodox form of Judaism. So it's still, they still have a Jewish burial within, but it's not in the same way as an Orthodox one. I've described you the Orthodox one. And there are now cemeteries, and there are land that have like non-denominational, or will have so that both a husband and a wife or different partners can be buried together. Unfortunately, on a Jewish Orthodox side, you have to be strictly Orthodox, and the Orthodox line is through the maternal line. So that's things. But like everything in life, people, it's a choice. So people may choose to not sit for 7 days. Now, at one stage you used to sit through 7 days. People now might only sit for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. It's a choice. During COVID, which was really positive, obviously people couldn't come together, so people still did it. But then people who couldn't make the Shiva House, or people who lived in different countries or different parts of England, did it like we're doing it. So we adapted. So that, and also funerals were recorded and things like that. So technology has helped in some way. So that was, and I'm sure that was the same for all different faiths and backgrounds as well.
Yeah. Is if somebody in the Jewish community dies, is there what's the role of the community in terms of being present at the funeral? Is it seen as important for people to physically be present?
Yes, and you're not invited. It's not an invite. People just turn up. So the rabbi will conduct the service. Family. There's a prayer called a Kaddish, which the people who are sitting Shiva, and it's the men who say it. The men will say it. Will say a memorial prayer. But sorry, I'll look at it. So sorry, I lost my place.
No, and actually, someone's just asked a question that will help you get your flow, your train of thought back. I know the feeling very well, Janine. I regularly find myself standing places, wondering why I went to that place. Tom's just asked, would you mind telling us a little bit more about Kaddish? What when it's said, how often it's said, who says it? Just a little bit more detail about that.
The Kaddish is a memorial prayer. You have to have a quorum of 10 men. So in most Jewish services, you have to have 10 men to be able to. The reason why you say it is to elevate the soul. So you're actually not saying Kaddish for yourself, you're saying Kaddish for the person who's died. So and the Kaddish is like elevating the soul to heaven. It's a memorial prayer, and you say it in the so in Judaism there are 3 services that take place during the day, usually in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening. And the Shiva service, where people come, is usually about 8 o'clock in the evening, and it's a half an hour service. And then people say, the other thing I say, you can, where things have changed, actually, you asked me a question earlier, which I was thinking about it, is that now we have more eulogies. At one stage people never spoke, but now there are more eulogies. It's much more modern now, which is actually much more personable, and people can, reminisce about the person, and it's quite a nice thing to do.
So Janine, is that there are then 3 services associated with this that this person has died.
So general every service during the day. This is irrespective of the Jewish service, but you say is that you have 3 services a day in Jewish normal custom and practice for a daily service.
Yeah.
But within that service, you say what's called a Kaddish. So within every service, you say a Kaddish for people who are either just in mourning or what we call a Yahrzeit, which is 12 months, which is a year after the person has died. You do a memorial prayer on the Yahrzeit for somebody who has died, and that is and again usually, and that's on the Jewish calendar, because it's not on the English date, it's on the date of the Jewish calendar, and it's usually again the men who do it, but women do that we are becoming more modern now, so women now also participate. But for the service to be to say Kaddish, you need 10 men, quorum of 10 men, and that is so always in the evening, and people are working during the day, so can't always make it, and in the morning people are rushing off, but if they can, it's the morning, not so much in the afternoon because people aren't around so much, but always in the evening, and people come to pay their respects.
And the funeral service with the person who's died present, that would happen outside of these 3 services.
So the funeral service, you say Kaddish you conclude the funeral by saying Kaddish.
Okay.
So that's the final part of the funeral service, is that person, as the men saying Kaddish.
Okay.
And then the congregation, and then the congregation will respond Amen, and parts of the Kaddish prayer, there's a few sort of words that the congregation, male and female, will respond to.
Okay.
It's about a minute or 2, that's all.
You've mentioned that the calendar's different. Will you tell us a little bit more about that?
I always get confused. So the English calendar is the sun, is that right? The moon? I always get mixed up. It's a different calendar, so you have different months. So you have different months, and it's associated. We're in a different year, and I should know that, but I don't. So I apologise.
No, gosh, I didn't even know there was a difference.
But there is the Jewish calendar is different. So you'd have a Hebrew date of the death according to the date. So for example, Jewish babies when they're born also have a Hebrew name as well as an English name, and they'll have the Hebrew date that they are born on as well.
Okay. And does that come around quicker then in the Jewish calendar?
Can be quicker it can be quicker or it can be slower, because the Jewish calendar has an extra month. So we have in February, we have every 4 years we have an extra month, as opposed to February, which has, so we call it.
Okay.
So it's all very complicated.
Okay.
That's
thank you.
That's for another day.
Yeah, no, that feels like a whole other webinar.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. So this is a very big question, potentially. What do you wish that non-Jewish healthcare professionals, funeral directors, anybody supporting someone and their family towards end of life, what do you wish that they knew and understood better about Jewish practices?
First of all, can I say, because I've worked here so long, and I've worked with different care homes, and I've worked with hospital staff, people always try and be as respectful as possible. So I absolutely can't have no criticism of anybody. I think everybody are always so respectful and want to know, and people don't know what they don't know. So I think that is the one thing I would always say. I think the problem is, for example, in the hospital, is the speed of everything. And people, I think healthcare professionals or in a nursing home want to, and it's always done in the best possible interest, make the person look as lovely as possible, and as and try and, you know, but I think the thing is to leave the body, you know, take away if they've got drains and things like that, is to leave the body, remove everything in terms of medical interventions, and then know who to contact. So I think try and get as much information about that person, who, you know, what do they want beforehand. And that's the same, we do the same thing. That's something that we've actually spoken about also, because we can't always make the assumption that everybody wants a Jewish burial or Jewish, although we do, so is to find out first of all, you know, is there anybody, do they belong to a synagogue, who do you want us to contact, what do you want us to do in the event of a death. I think that's the thing, that's one of the, but sort of not to be as non-invasive as possible, I think that's the thing. But having said all that, I think whatever anything is ever done is always done out of the most respect for that individual, whether it should have been carried out or not. I don't think there's anybody does anything for their wrong reason, if that makes sense.
Well, and actually that's sort of the reason these webinars exist, because I agree. I think we're all doing the best that we can at any given moment, and as you said, you don't know what you don't know. So I think often when things are done which unintendedly maybe weren't helpful, it does often come from a place of doing your best but not knowing any better. So you've mentioned physically how people might support somebody who's died, so the body after someone's died, and is there anything else that with good intention often just goes a little bit wrong, that it would be helpful for us all to know about?
I don't think things, I mean, for me, when I do the preparation of the body, I did a lady a couple of weeks ago, and she'd come from a nursing home, and we all just thought how gorgeous, because she was so well looked after. You could see, you know, because you're meant to also like go behind the nails, you're meant to clean the nail, this, you know, and most people are so well cared for. And I don't know whether this, maybe not wash people, but it's just, you know, just leave people as they be, because we change the clothes, and if they're wearing incontinence aids, for example, we take, you know, take everything off it. So just leave the body maybe as whole as it is, and just, but I don't, you know, it's a hard one, because when you've been looking after somebody for a long time, especially if somebody's in a care home as an example, you know, you feel it's your duty to make sure somebody leaves them in, you know, in a looking at. So it's a tricky one, really. It's a tricky one. Okay. I would think always try and find out as much information about what that individual would like beforehand, and if they're a member of a synagogue. The other thing is to maybe contact a member of clergy. Is there a member of the clergy that they would like to speak with beforehand? That is something that people, if they can, like to speak to somebody.
Sorry, I was glancing to the side. We've got some really, really great questions coming through on the chat. So I think we'll ditch our last planned question, and we'll move to some questions that people are putting into the chat. So I'll start with what's in the chat, and then we'll open the floor for people to ask the questions themselves if they want to. So the first question.
Apologise, that was me.
No, that's okay. I'm on someone else's computer, and I've got all sorts of notifications popping up that I don't know what to do anything about. So I hope they haven't been blinging. But Tom's asked, what's the significance of people placing a stone on the grave?
Yeah, so it's to say that you've visited and that you've been. And it's just a sort of connecting with that individual.
So is that between the person who's visited and the grave, or is that to show family members that they have been visited?
No, because they don't know who visited. So you could, for example, you also normally go and visit before one of the things that you do when you visit we go visiting the grounds or visit the cemetery, tend to go before the Jewish New Year or Yom Kippur. So that is something you do as a visit annually. That's something, if at least annually, that you would go to do. And it's my understanding, but everybody will have their own reason, but you don't put your name on it, so you don't know. It's like your connection with that individual person who's there.
Okay. And does that stone come from anywhere?
Anyway, it could be on the ground,
Anywhere.
it could be from within the, yes, it's not, or some people might bring their own, but it's not, it's usually from the other thing I haven't said, that when you leave the cemetery, you wash your hands. There's the place that you wash your hands, and again, that's to do with the separation between life and death.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from Sam. Do you want to ask it yourself, Sam, or shall I?
I was just wondering whether you said, Janine, that there was a belief that you shouldn't hasten death. So does that make families or clients reluctant to take painkillers or to have sedatives or to have their symptoms managed? Are they?
Absolutely not. No.
No.
The thing is to make that no. So you will always go with the advice of the medical team. Never go against medical advice. And you want somebody to be as comfortable as possible. So no, never, no. So when I say preserve life, it's not. So for example, I think trying to what has changed actually. At one stage, many years ago, somebody who may have taken their own life used to be buried still in the Jewish cemetery, but in a special part of it. That's completely changed now. So I think an understanding of mental health and illness and all those things have changed. So, but I think going off to, to speed your own death or to help assist somebody in dying, which I know is a completely different discussion, is not something that would be encouraged by the Jewish faith. But always to make life, to preserve life as comfortably as possible, but definitely not to go against medical advice.
Thank you. Can I just ask one more thing? I was wondering, because of my works with children, so all the practices you were saying about saying a prayer at the bedside and the body being prepared by volunteers that come in, and you were talking about pouring cold water over the body. Do all of those practices stay the same with children that have died, or is that more with adults? Or
same, the Jewish,
same,
but it's but it's not the fact, it's the volunteers who do that.
okay.
It's very rare. I've not known it where family members participate, or it's yeah.
Okay, I just wondered whether families wanted to when it was their child, but no, that's interesting. Thank you.
I mean, I think I thank goodness I've never been involved personally with a child, but it's very individual, and I think, but it's still, yes, it's always because it's the same body, and yes.
Can children go to the funeral as well? They
can. There's no restriction.
Okay.
It's up to the parents, and I mean, yeah, it's children do, but it's not. It's Jewish funerals, as I said, are quite sparse, and it can be quite shocking. And I know I have colleagues who've never been to a Jewish funeral have then been to one, and because there's no people don't particularly dress up, it's not, so you can wear bright colours, but you don't tend, it's not, but you don't have to dress formally in black, and
no,
it's not it's quite sparse, and there are no, as I say, there's no flowers, there's no, it's yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Sheena, do you want to ask your question, or will I? If your camera stays off, I'll assume it's you either can't or would rather not. So Sheena's a independent funeral celebrant, and she's asking whether there's any way that a celebrant would be involved in a Jewish funeral service or farewell service.
So I think potentially would be, but not an Orthodox one. So I think what normally happens, I think there's usually, so there's liberal Judaism, there's in sort of, so when we asked earlier about the Jewish whether things have changed, things have become more relaxed. So, for example, the basic traditions have stayed the same of custom and practice throughout the religion. But, for example, on a Sabbath, you're not meant to drive or spend money or do well. So the more liberal synagogues, you can drive and park in the car park. It's a different. But there isn't an Orthodox rabbi. But it's usually the clergy of that congregation will still take part in the service. So, if I'm being really honest, I haven't had enough experience of non-Orthodox funerals, but the ones that I have been to, it's always been the spiritual leader of that congregation. So there's always a rabbi or somebody attached. For example, some of them have like female rabbis now, which, however many years ago that would be. There aren't Orthodox female rabbis, but there are liberal, more modern ones, and they will be leading their congregation. So they may, for example, allow cremation. There's different, So and there'll be a mixture of the two sometimes. So the more modern and the more traditional.
Thank you, Janine. And actually, it's a helpful distinction, because what Janine is sharing with us today is the Orthodox perspective. Tom's asked a question about how things might look differently from a more liberal perspective, and I guess, Janine, that's to take the answer you've just given, that's maybe a hard one for you to answer, because that's a very big question, isn't it? And maybe not quite the personal and professional experience that you're bringing. Shelley, do you want to ask your questions?
Yes, thank you. So I've got a couple of questions because I'm greedy, so apologies. So what support is offered in terms of grief and grieving, Janine? So is that done within the synagogue, or do people go outside of the synagogue and the community to receive any support?
So, first of all, the hospital has a Jewish chaplain. So when you're in the process of the illness and the build-up to we have a Jewish chaplain in Leeds called Rabbi Chates, as part of the chaplaincy. So he's very involved in that, and he will support the family. He will support the patient, the individual, through that process. And he's part of the general chaplaincy of the hospital, the interfaith work that he does. Each synagogue has their own spiritual leader, have their own rabbi, and people will turn to them, and they will support their own members of their own congregation. Not every Jewish person, irrespective of their level of orthodoxy, is a member of a synagogue. So we can't always make that assumption. So quite often people will go to the spiritual leader, or they will go to friends and family, or some people, we at the Jewish Welfare Board, we can support people if they're feeling completely overwhelmed by the process. We have, because there's the practical side of things as well. So there are Jewish organisations, one called Paperweight, as well as the Leeds Jewish Welfare Board, who help with maybe the financial side of things in terms of organising the paperwork. So there might be a couple have been married, for example, for 60 years, and the husband has always dealt with everything, and the wife has suddenly never paid a bill in her life and doesn't know where to go with all. So there are organisations who can help just put things together and direct them through that process. Or alternatively, it's again just going through normal counselling channels if necessary and if needed. But there's also, the Jewish community is very cohesive, it's very communal, and there's usually somebody, and also quite busybody, I can say that. So there's always somebody who'll know somebody who's a bit worried about somebody, and just say, somebody will like keep an eye on somebody. We also have organisations who like will send out Friday night dinners if somebody's feeling like just can't motivate themselves. So we'll send out Sabbath dinners, don't have to pay for it. We can just make sure that all that is taken care of. Yeah, so there are things, but in the same way, people either use internal support mechanisms, or again, they might not want that. They might want to be more anonymous and go into the wider community as well.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. And my second question, because you were saying obviously the stone is placed on the grave afterwards as a sign of visiting. Do families, do flowers or things get placed at all, or is that just not done within the Jewish community?
Not done, but if it is done, it's fine. Nobody's going to go, no one's going to say how very dare, and you know, that's up to the individual. So it's depending not to, but it wouldn't, nobody would want to go out the way to embarrass or upset somebody. And to be honest, it's people, the cemetery, people just walk around. There's nobody like watching you or overseeing you or saying you should do this or you shouldn't be doing that. You're allowed to. Some people, when they go to visit the grave, when I was saying that every year you go and you pay, well, you can go as often as you want, but most people tend to go before the Jewish New Year. Some people will go and talk to the person. Some people might say a prayer. Some people, it's whatever, you know. Some people, my husband will go and stand there and visit and say prayers and blah blah blah, or I'll go and when I talk to my parents who passed away, I have a chat and tell them what's going on. So everybody does their own thing, really.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Janine. It's been so interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Shelley. We've got one final question from Tom. Tom, do you want to find you on my screen? I'll have a pause in case you'd like to. So Tom is asking, are there any service restrictions during the Sabbath or other holy days?
So if somebody has passed up, in terms of the shiva, as I said, that stops. You don't sit shiva on the Sabbath. You don't watch the TV. You don't suddenly start watching TV or do any things, but you don't sit shiva on that Sabbath day. And all Sabbath and all Jewish festivals start from sunset to sunset. So Sabbath, as an example, starts on Friday night. So you don't have the Friday night service of shiva, where people come to the house. And you don't on Saturday night, and then it will start again on Sunday morning. If somebody's died during Sabbath, they're not buried on Sabbath, so you don't have a burial. No burial takes place on Sabbath or any Jewish festival. So none of the high holy days. So then you can't, burial can't take place on those days. So that's when it will be delayed.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully, Tom, that answers your question. Feel free to pop your camera on if not. Okay, well, I think given that it's 1 minute to midday, and I think we've spoken through everything that people have put in the chats. Lots of thanks coming through, Janine, and lots of just acknowledgement of how interesting it's been. And it really has, because the purpose of the webinars, and it's absolutely what today's been about, is just having the opportunity to hear somebody speak about their community and their religion and culture and perspective, and explain it in just a really safe way, where it's okay to say, I don't really understand, why do we do this, why is that happening, and hopefully it's the start of conversation going forward.
Well, sorry, I was going to say that if anybody wants my email address, if you could send it, if there's a question or they want something, then yeah.
Thank you, that's wonderful. With your permission, then I'll put your email address in the follow-up email that everybody gets through Eventbrite. The next webinar is not until January, because acknowledging that everything gets very busy at this time of year, and that's about the spirituality within pediatric end-of-life support, and we have somebody from Martin House coming to speak about that.